Hello and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to have a short introduction about fats. What different type of fats we have, what is the difference between them, who are perhaps more healthy to eat and who should you perhaps stay away from. And also a little bit of key takeaways on the various type of fat and how they all are connected, the long, the short, the saturated, the unsaturated. So if this is something for you, please stay until the end. So if we look at fat, you might have heard that they can be divided into saturated, unsaturated, short chain, long chain. What are the differences and which fat belongs to what group? So I've done a small matrix here where we have on one axis the length of the fat, and this is how long it is, if it's short or if it's long. And I will go into a little bit more of the details on that soon. So that's on one axis here. And then on the other one we have if they are saturated, monounsaturated or polyunsaturated. And monounsaturated means it has one double bond. Polyunsaturated means it has 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 double bonds. It has more than one double bond. And short fats are considered the one with 2 to 5 carbons, which typically are butyric acid, but also acetate is a short chain fatty acid. And this often comes from fermentation in your gut, but they're also present in some foods, fermented food in general, but also in other type of foods like butter and so on. Therefore the name butter actually from butyric acid. And the difference, sometimes you use the acid name, sometimes you use the base name. Like you can say butyric acid or butyrate. You can say octanoic acid or octanoate. It's the same fat, it's just which pH it operates in. So in the body where the pH is quite neutral, except the stomach of course, where it's acidic, everything is in the basic form. Like lactate is the form of lactate in your muscle. It's lactate, not lactic acid actually. The same here, that butyric acid is the acidic form, but in the body it changes to butyrate because butyric acid is too acidic for us. But it's the same fat, it's just the proton on or off, depending on the pH. So in the stomach it will be the acid form, and then when it's absorbed it will be the butyrate form. That's the same for everything we eat. It turns into the acid form in the stomach because we have acid here, and then it turns back to the basic form when we absorb it. Medium chains, generally considered 6 to 12. Long chains, 14 to 20, and very long chains, there are more than 22 carbons. If in the saturated group, we also have here the short chain I mentioned, the medium chain, we have things like coconut butter, coconut oil. We have in butter, we also have some medium chains, triglycerides. And triglycerides is just a fancy name of fats. Because you have 3 glycerols, triglycerides together, 3 fatty acids on the glycerol. So it's called 3 means 3 glycerides, meaning they have 3 fatty acids connected to 1 glycerol. That is regular fat as we eat and as we store it. And then how we use it, then we break them loose and use the fatty acids. The long chain, you find them also in meat and butter, and the saturated one. Even though meat often consists more of monounsaturated fats than saturated. Usually it's like 45% monounsaturated and slightly less saturated fat, and then some polyunsaturated. But often when you hear the media talk about it, it's like meat is only saturated fat, which is not true. It actually has the most common fatty acids in most meats, in beef, is oleic acid, the same fatty acid as in olive oil. Funny one. But then of course there are more saturated fats in meat than in olive oil, because olive oil have very little of that. But the most common fatty acids in both of them is the same fatty acid. Then if you look at the monounsaturated long chain, you have olive oil, palm oil, beef, and particularly if it's grass-fed beef, you have some in chicken. And then if you go to polyunsaturated, you have all these plant-based oils, soybean, sunflower, cotton seeds, so on and so forth. As you can see, there aren't really any monopolysaturated on the short ones here. There might be some very, very odd one in this group, the medium chain, but simply because when they're so short, there's no room to put the double bonds anywhere. Then on the very long ones, you have things that aren't really considered human food, even though some people eat it. A lot of long chain saturated fats, but we use them more for oils, lubricants in engines, in cars, you name it. Candles, for example, is actually just long chain fats. You have a monounsaturated long chains, not so common either in human food, but you have one called uric acid that you, for example, have in rapeseed oil. And the red here means this is not suitable for human consumption. Green means it is, and yellow is a little bit borderline. Then on the long chains, poly, you have the long chain omega-3s and omega-6. Like fish oil, you have them in liver, in beef, in particular in grass-fed beef. And you have things like EPA, DPA, DHA and THA. Those are various types of omega-3, long chain omega-3 fatty acids that occur naturally. I know when you take supplements, you usually focus on one or two of them, but just be mindful, there is more than a handful of long chain omega-3 fatty acids. And there are some indication that it might be better to get them all and not just select one or two, as you often do in the supplement form. So how are these used in the body, and what is a little bit the difference between them? This is a cell. So don't freak out, and the cell consists of many compartments or components. Like the nucleus is the headquarter, we have all our genes, the DNA. We have the mitochondria, which you probably have heard of, where the energy production takes place. And we have some Golgi and other things that happening in here. And where the fats really are in here in the membranes, in the cell membranes, to make up the membranes, but also in the membranes of all these organelles, which they are called. I mean, fat is also used for energy, but it's also used as construction material. And it's a very important construction material. Our brain contains loads of fats, in particular the long chain omega-3 fats. And if we zoom in on the cell wall, so this is a cell, this is a cell membrane. There is all kind of proteins in the cell membrane. These proteins regulate things, they take in nutrients, let nutrient out. Amino acids, for example, and so on and so forth, are often regulated through protein, how they go in and out. A few things go in and out without a transporter, but most nutrients, most molecules need a transporter to get them in or out. That is how the cell decides what they want to take in and what they want to take out. And if we zoom in here, is this membrane consists of the fats, where you have a polar head, it's called, which is facing outside here, and inside of these long tails. And here you can see even more zoomed in how these called a layer, and those fats we eat are phosphorylated. That is why it's called a phospholipid layer. And the reason why the length of them matters is that if you see here on the straight one, which is a saturated one, it's straight. So if that one is 18 carbons long, if you're going to have an unsaturated fat, which you see here, they're bent. And they both are supposed to reach in the membrane the same length. The unsaturated one needs to be longer to have the same reach. If you have a straight one like this, the one that is bent will not reach this side. So it needs to be a little bit longer to have the same reach. And you want the fats to reach from the surface to the middle and touch each other, because you have them on each side like this. So that is the major reason why you see here that the short ones are saturated, and then when you go to the longer ones, they are more and more unsaturated. Because you need 22 or 24 carbons to have the same reach as an 18 carbon saturated. So they reach from one side of the membrane to the other. Otherwise it becomes hole there, and you don't want holes there. And that is also why you shouldn't eat fats that doesn't fit into this. Now the body can change the length of fat to some extent. It cannot produce omega-3s or omega-6. It can't make that double bond. More to other fats, it can to some extent produce or remodel to its needs. So this is essentially what fats are doing. They are part of membranes, and these membranes are all our cells, the muscle cells, the skin cells, your brain cells. And this is also why some people say that you build your skin from the outside out and not with creams, even though there are some creams that have some effect. The reason they say that, or the reason it should say that, is that because, for example, what you eat goes into your cell membrane, and that makes your cells give it certain properties. Because if you eat too little omega-3, for example, you will have stiffer cells. That is why the brain is so much omega-3, because it's very soft and fluid. That is why fishes in the cold ocean have more omega-3, because when it's cold, everything gets more stiff, and then you want more omega-3s to make it more fluid. Because you need a certain degree of fluidity of the cell membrane for it to be able to put in the transporter proteins, to be able for it to have things going through the membrane when it wants to do so. So yeah, this is just the basic about fats, the different length, the saturated, unsaturated, how the key thing with them, the difference is that saturated are straight and unsaturated generally are bent. At least if it's healthy fats. There's something called trans fats, it's a different story. I will do a different video on that, I think. So, hope you like this. Let me know in the comments if you have questions or just inputs for future videos. And yeah, like and subscribe. See you soon again.